Hello, dear friends. If there is a promised land, we are now crossing the desert. Opinion piece. Prophetic signs. 40 critical days. Fall of Babylon. Year of Revelation. Prophetic timeline. Divine intervention. Announced rupture. Systemic correction. Red Sea type miracle. From darkness to light. Temporal breaking point. End of the Roman Empire. Prophecy of the White Wolf. Let's start. The famous prophetic analyst of biblical cycles and financial markets, Bo Polney, has predicted a period of global chaos lasting 40 days and 40 nights until February or March, followed by a Red Sea-like miracle. He also speaks of the need for direct divine intervention to correct global corruption and trigger profound structural changes. In his view, 2026 will be a culminating year, not a beginning, but a culmination of a very long process. From this perspective, his message about 2026 points to a significant temporary breaking point, a systemic purging or correction event, and the repositioning of the true value of gold, silver, and tangible assets. This emphasis is related to his belief that biblical signs and market cycles converge during this period. Polney describes 2026 as the year of revelation, with a shift from darkness to extreme light. Although his focus is on markets and cycles, many of his recent videos mention that 2026 could bring extreme or dramatic events to fulfill certain biblical timing patterns related to justice or the exposure of corruption. He also cites a recent prophecy by Julie Green about a great white wolf in the White House, suggesting it could be J.D. Vance. Polney contextualizes this within biblical timelines, hinting at revelations and judgments in 2026, though he doesn't elaborate. He doesn't give details. Polney has said that silver could experience a very strong price movement in 2026, reaching exceptionally high levels or marking a turning point for the global financial system. In his view, this rise in silver signals the collapse of Babylon and the transfer of wealth for a great revival with the fire of the Holy Spirit, not with water, as in the days of Noah. And he predicts 7 years of peace and prosperity. Alarm or fall. Ismael Perez speaks of a new global alliance that will bring about the fall of Babylon or the end of the Roman Empire. In his view, a historical realignment is developing behind the scenes, and the new global alliance is forming, one that no longer responds to the failed institutions of the old world. The globalist financial architecture is entering its final phase, reflecting the same fate that befell the Roman Empire: overexpansion, corruption, debt, and loss of legitimacy. This is not chaos, but a controlled dismantling. The modern Roman system was based on centralized power, endless warfare, fiat currency, and an elected bureaucracies. This system is now being challenged by a multipolar alliance that prioritizes sovereignty, regional power blocks, resource independence, and the end of imperial governance. In his view, what we are witnessing is not the end of civilization, but the end of the imperial control. The old empire is collapsing and being replaced by a new international order outside the globalist framework. This shift paves the way for a new financial architecture that rejects centralized banking and debt-based fiat systems in favor of decentralized multipolar networks. In this vision, sovereignty returns to nations and communities. The financial power of globalist institutions is dispersed, and a new system emerges based on transparency, regional autonomy, and distributed value sharing. Final phase. For his part, Ricky describes the final phase of humanity as a controlled collapse leading to a global reset in 2026. He believes there have been two phases of humanity that have led to social decline, and that the third and final phase, which would mark the end of times, is already underway. He emphasizes that current events such as war, riots, and soaring precious metal prices mark the end of the old era of the dark side, with massive revelations and ascension for the awakened. Ricky aligns his vision with Bo Bonney and Ismael Perez, mentioned previously, with riots like those of Minneapolis, which would initiate a cycle of chaos in January and February, followed by the EBS elite arrests and a fiduciary collapse. He also predicts divine intervention on July 4th that would lead to a golden age after November. With an empowered toe, Ricky sees 2026 as a great unifying revelation, not a total apocalypse but a purge for the new earth, and calls for the awakening of inner sovereignty, avoiding media-driven fear, and preparing for the 2026 convergence. Humanity will triumph if it vibrates at a high frequency. Ricky also speaks about the Peace Boat, a diplomatic initiative that has rapidly expanded into a global entity, with some 25 countries already confirming their participation in more than 60 world leaders invited. Cover up. What they never told you, according to Mr. Poole. They never told you who controls the money. They never told you why debt is permanent. They never told you why wars never end. They never told you why politicians never go to jail. They never told you why banks get bailed out and people don't. They never told you why the truth is labeled disinformation. They never told you why censorship is called security. They never told you why division is promoted. They never told you why whistleblowers disappear. They never told you why the media speaks with one voice. They never told you why elections don't fix anything. They never told you why inflation is called normal. They never told you why owning nothing is called freedom. They never told you why surveillance is called protection. They never told you why truth needs fact checkers. They never told you why food is being poisoned. You were never told why healthcare has become a business. You were never told why obedience is praised. You were never told why faith is under attack. You were never told why the family is being undermined. You were never told why gold is being suppressed. You were never told why cash is disappearing. You were never told why questioning is dangerous. You were never told because if you knew, you wouldn't obey. This was never about left versus right. It was always about control versus freedom. The spell is breaking, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, says Mr. Poole. Breaking news. Trump announced a preliminary agreement on Greenland with the NATO Secretary General. Tariffs for European countries are cancelled. The US created a radioactive waste repository under a Greenland glacier. The European Parliament holds the trade agreement with the US after Trump's threats. The US Secretary of Commerce says globalization has failed. If the US economy doesn't recover, the demand for dollars will fall. In Davos, Trump challenged globalist ideas, demonstrating an ideological shift and mocked the buzzwords about sustainable development used to stifle growth. Americas. The EU-Mercosur agreement is once again suspended for 2 years. Mexico extradites dozens of drug traffickers to the US to calm the coming storm. The Mexican peso reaches 17.58 units. More than half of art thefts in Mexico touched religious temples. Ecuador fails to overcome its energy crisis. Ecuador deploys thousands of soldiers against organized crime. Bolivia's economy could be in recession until 2027. Bolivia will face a recession in 26 and 27 according to the World Bank. Colombia is the third country in the world with the highest interest rates on dollar-denominated debt. Chile declares a state of emergency in areas affected by wildfires. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.